r/AITA. My boss called me worthless at my wedding, so I destroyed his career. AITA for destroying my boss's entire life after he humiliated me at my wedding? The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the hotel ballroom, and for a moment, the only sound was my heart hammering against my ribs. Every single person at my wedding reception, my grandmother, my new in-laws, my college friends, stood frozen, staring at the man who had just called me absolutely worthless in front of everyone I loved. Marcus Caldwell, my boss of 18 months, swayed slightly in his expensive suit, his face flushed red either from alcohol or rage. I honestly couldn't tell which anymore. He'd somehow talked his way past security, claiming to be a close family friend, and had been lurking near the bar for the past hour before finally making his move. Sarah here, he announced to my horrified wedding guests, gesturing wildly at me in my white dress, is the most incompetent employee I've ever had the misfortune to manage. This whole marriage thing? Just another waste of time, like everything else she does. My new husband David stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Sir, I'm going to need you to leave. Now. Marcus laughed, that same condescending sound I'd heard echoing from his corner office every day for the past year and a half. Oh, the husband wants to play hero? Good luck with this one, buddy. She can't even handle basic marketing reports without screwing them up. The worst part wasn't the humiliation burning through my chest like acid. It wasn't even the way my elderly relatives were clutching their pearls or how my bridesmaids had gone pale with shock. The worst part was that I wasn't surprised. This was just Marcus being Marcus, except now he'd invaded the one space that was supposed to be mine. You need to go, I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the string quartet that had awkwardly continued playing in the background. What was that? Marcus cupped his ear mockingly. Speak up, Sarah. Use that voice I'm always telling you to find in meetings. Oh wait, you don't have one. That's when something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long and finally hit its limit. I thought about the USB drive hidden in my jewelry box at home, loaded with audio recordings of Marcus screaming at employees until they cried. I thought about the spreadsheets I'd accidentally discovered last month, showing systematic fund diversions that definitely weren't going toward company expenses. I thought about Jessica from accounting who'd quit without notice after that team building retreat where Marcus had cornered her in the hotel hallway. I thought about how he'd made me work until midnight on reports he'd throw in the trash the next morning, how he'd told me I was lucky to even have a job when I'd asked for time off for my wedding planning, how he'd made 18 months of my life a walking nightmare. And now he was here, on my wedding day, trying to poison this too. Security. David called out, but I held up my hand. No, I said, my voice steady now. I looked directly at Marcus, and for the first time in 18 months, I smiled at him. Really smiled. It's fine. Let him finish. I want everyone to hear exactly who Marcus Caldwell really is. Marcus's smirk faltered slightly, but he was too drunk on his own power to recognize the danger. He should have left when David told him to. He really should have left. Marcus's eyes narrowed at my response, clearly not expecting me to invite him to continue his public character assassination. The alcohol had made him bold, but not smart. Oh, you want me to tell them about your real work performance? He stepped closer, his voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. How about the Henderson campaign you completely botched? Lost us a 6-figure client because you couldn't follow simple instructions. I felt David's hand slip into mine, warm and steadying. My maid of honor Emma moved closer too, flanking my other side. But I didn't need protecting anymore. For the first time in 18 months, I had Marcus exactly where I wanted him. Please, continue, I said sweetly. Tell everyone about Henderson. Marcus was too caught up in his own performance to notice the trap. 3 months of work down the drain because Sarah here decided she knew better than her supervisors. Had to personally apologize to Richard Henderson myself. Told him we'd be replacing Sarah on all future projects. My smile widened. What Marcus didn't know, what he'd never bothered to learn because he'd been too busy taking credit, was that I'd recorded every conversation about Henderson. Including the one where he'd explicitly told me to change the campaign strategy against the client's wishes, then thrown me under the bus when Henderson complained. Anything else? I prompted. Where do I even start? Marcus spread his arms wide, playing to his captive audience. The missed deadlines, the attitude problems, the complete inability to handle constructive criticism. Last week alone, she screwed up the Morrison presentation so badly I had to personally step in and fix it. I almost laughed out loud. The Morrison presentation that I'd worked on for 2 weeks, that Marcus had literally copy-pasted and presented as his own work while I sat in the back row, watching him take credit for every idea I developed. This is insane, my cousin Rachel whispered somewhere behind me. Who is this psycho? But Marcus heard her and whirled around. Psycho? I'm the only one here dealing with reality. Do you know what it's like trying to manage someone who's completely incompetent? The stress of constantly having to clean up after. Marcus. My grandmother's voice cut through his rant like a blade. At 83, Eleanor Whitman had zero patience for men who raised their voices at women. She stepped forward, all 5 feet of her radiating the kind of authority that came from running a successful business for 40 years. I think you've said quite enough. And you are? Marcus's tone was dismissive, but I saw him unconsciously straighten his tie. I'm Sarah's grandmother. And I'm also the Eleanor Whitman of Whitman and Associates. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Even drunk, he recognized the name of one of the city's most prominent PR firms. The same firm that had handled crisis management for his company 3 years ago during their product recall scandal. Mrs. Whitman, this is just a workplace disagreement between a grown man and my granddaughter on her wedding day, my grandmother finished coldly. How professionally impressive. I watched Marcus realize he'd made a catastrophic error. He looked around the ballroom, finally seeming to process that he was surrounded by my family and friends, people with their own careers, connections, and opinions about men who crashed weddings to humiliate young women. Perhaps I should. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he stammered. Oh, there's been no misunderstanding, I said softly. Everyone here understands exactly who you are now, Marcus. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The trap was set. All he had to do was keep talking. Marcus's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a mottled purple that clashed horribly with his silk tie. He'd sobered up just enough to realize he was standing in a minefield, but not enough to stop stepping on the explosives. Sarah, let's discuss this privately, he said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back smoothly, and David moved between us like a wall of protective muscle. Don't touch my wife. Wife. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Good luck with that. You have no idea what you've signed up for. Sarah's the type who'll promise you the world and deliver absolutely nothing. Just like she does at work. The collective intake of breath from my wedding guests was audible. But it was my father who stepped forward this time, his face granite hard. Dad had spent 30 years as a federal prosecutor, and he had a way of looking at people that made them want to confess to crimes they hadn't even committed. Mr. Caldwell, is it? His voice was courtroom quiet. I'm curious about your management philosophy. Do you often attend your employees' personal events uninvited? Marcus's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. No, this is. I was invited. Sarah invited me. The lie hung in the air like a bad smell. I'd never given Marcus my wedding venue information. I'd never even told him the date. The only way he could have found out was by going through my desk or my computer, both violations of company privacy policy. Really? I tilted my head innocently. Marcus, remind me again when I invited you? Was it before or after you told me I was too stupid to plan a wedding and a career at the same time? His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Around us, I could hear the quiet sounds of phones being pulled from purses and pockets. My generation didn't just witness drama, we documented it. And Marcus was about to become very, very documented. That's taken out of context, he stammered. What context makes telling an employee she's too stupid appropriate workplace conversation? My father's prosecutor voice was in full effect now. Marcus looked around desperately, finally seeming to grasp that he was surrounded by lawyers, business owners, and people with functioning moral compasses. But instead of retreating, he doubled down, because men like Marcus always double down. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, he said, his voice rising again. Do you know what it's like trying to run a department with dead weight like Sarah dragging everyone down? The company expects results, and when your team is full of people who can't deliver. Dead weight? My new sister-in-law Lisa spoke up from near the cake table. She was a human resources director for a Fortune 500 company, and she looked absolutely fascinated. That's an interesting term to use about an employee in public. Marcus spun toward her. It's an accurate term. Some people just aren't cut out for professional environments. They need constant hand-holding, constant supervision. Sarah here couldn't manage a lemonade stand without detailed instructions. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not hurt, I was past being hurt by Marcus. This was calculation. Pure, crystalline calculation. You're right, I said quietly. I do follow instructions very carefully. For example, I always document everything, just like you taught me to. Every meeting, every conversation, every piece of feedback. I keep very detailed records. Something flickered behind Marcus's bloodshot eyes. A shadow of concern. What kind of records? He asked slowly. My smile was sugar-sweet and absolutely venomous. The thorough kind. Marcus went very, very still. The kind of stillness that comes when a predator realizes it might actually be the prey. Records, he repeated slowly, like he was tasting the word for poison. Oh yes, I said, my voice light and conversational. Audio recordings, mostly. You know how you're always telling us to be proactive and document everything for liability purposes? I took that advice very seriously. The color had completely drained from his face now. I could practically see his alcohol-soaked brain trying to catalog every inappropriate thing he'd said in the past 18 months. It was going to be a very long list. You can't, there are laws about recording people without consent, he said, but his voice had lost all its bluster. My father's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Actually, this is a one-party consent state. As long as Sarah was present for the conversations, she's perfectly within her legal rights to record them. Thank you, Daddy, I said sweetly. See, Marcus? I come from a family that actually knows things. We believe in being prepared. Marcus's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal looking for an exit. You're bluffing. You don't have anything. Don't I? I tilted my head thoughtfully. Would you like me to play the one where you screamed at Jessica for 20 minutes about her pathetic attempts at professionalism? Or maybe the one where you told Kevin from IT that he was lucky to have a job anywhere with his obvious limitations? Oh, or we could start with last Tuesday, when you told me that my emotional instability made me unsuitable for client interactions. With each example, Marcus seemed to shrink a little more. But the real panic didn't hit his eyes until I mentioned Jessica. Interesting. Jessica quit, he said quickly. Whatever she told you. Oh, she didn't tell me anything, I interrupted. She didn't need to. I had the recording from the night you cornered her in the hotel hallway during the Morrison retreat. The one where you told her that her career advancement might depend on how flexible she was willing to be. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Marcus looked like he was about to be sick, and honestly, I wouldn't have minded if he threw up right there on the marble floor. It would be fitting. That's not what happened, he whispered. Isn't it? I pulled my phone from my clutch purse and held it up. Should we find out? I mean, we're all here, we're all dressed up, might as well have some entertainment with dinner. Sarah, don't. Marcus's voice cracked like he was going through puberty. Please. You don't understand the full situation. Then explain it, my grandmother said crisply. Explain to us how threatening a young woman's career unless she provides sexual favors is a full situation we don't understand. Several of my male cousins had moved closer now, forming a loose semicircle around Marcus. They weren't being threatening, just present. Very, very present. Marcus seemed to notice this and took an unconscious step backward. It wasn't a threat, he said desperately. It was just office banter. Inappropriate, yes, but not. I would never actually. Never actually what? I asked softly. Never actually fire someone for refusing your advances? Because I had the termination paperwork for 3 different women over the past 2 years. All performance-based, of course. All very carefully documented. And all filed within 2 weeks of rejecting your office banter. Marcus's knees actually wobbled. Where did you? I'm very good at my job, Marcus. You just never bothered to notice because you were too busy trying to tear me down. I slipped my phone back into my purse. The question now is, what exactly are we going to do about this situation? The wedding reception had become something else entirely. A reckoning, maybe. Or a trial. And Marcus was about to discover what it felt like to be completely, utterly powerless. Marcus looked around the ballroom like a cornered rat, his expensive suit now wrinkled and sweat-stained despite the elegant air conditioning. I could see his mind racing, trying to find an angle, an escape route, anything that might save him from the hole he dug himself into. You're making a mistake, Sarah, he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. You have no idea who you're messing with. My family has connections in this city that go back generations. My father-in-law sits on the board of directors for half the companies in this state. I felt David tense beside me, but I squeezed his hand reassuringly. Marcus was grasping at straws now, trying to intimidate me the same way he'd been doing for 18 months. The difference was, I wasn't his powerless employee anymore. I was surrounded by my family, my friends, and most importantly, the truth. Connections, I repeated thoughtfully. You mean like your father-in-law Richard Morrison? The one whose campaign I designed? The one you took credit for? Marcus's face went ash gray. How do you know about your family connections? I smiled sweetly. Marcus, you've been bragging about your wife's family money for months. Did you think I wasn't listening? Did you think I didn't wonder why someone with your limited qualifications managed to secure such a high-level position so quickly? My grandmother stepped forward, her sharp eyes glinting with something that looked suspiciously like pride. Nepotism is such an ugly word, don't you think? Especially when it's combined with embezzlement and sexual harassment. You can't prove anything, Marcus snarled, but his voice cracked on the last word. Whatever you think you have, it won't hold up. My wife's family has lawyers who will. Your wife's family, I interrupted, is about to learn some very interesting things about you. In fact, I believe your wife Catherine is friends with my cousin Jennifer. They were in the same sorority at Princeton. I gestured toward the head table where Jennifer sat with her mouth slightly open, her phone already in her hand. Jen, you still have Catherine Morrison's number, right? From the alumni group? Jennifer nodded slowly, her eyes wide with realization. We had coffee just last week. She was talking about how proud she was of Marcus's success at work, how he's been working such long hours lately. Working long hours, I mused. Is that what we're calling those evening strategy sessions with female employees? The ones that always seemed to happen when everyone else had gone home? Marcus lunged forward suddenly, desperation making him reckless. Give me your phone. Delete everything. We can work this out, I'll give you a promotion, a raise, whatever you want. Just don't. David caught Marcus's wrist before he could reach me, his grip firm but controlled. I suggest you step back. Now. This is extortion, Marcus gasped, clutching his wrist. You're blackmailing me. That's a felony. My father's laugh was cold and professional. Son, I prosecuted actual extortion cases. This isn't extortion. This is consequences. There's a difference. Besides, I added casually, I haven't asked you for anything. I haven't demanded money or favors or silence. I've simply pointed out that actions have consequences, and your actions have been particularly consequential. Marcus looked around the room one more time, perhaps finally realizing that there wasn't a single sympathetic face in the crowd. My wedding guests, lawyers, business owners, teachers, nurses, people with integrity, stared back at him with varying degrees of disgust and fascination. What do you want? He whispered finally. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of my grandmother's pearls around my neck and the strength of my family surrounding me. I want you to understand something, Marcus. For 18 months, you made me feel small. Powerless. Worthless. I paused, letting the word hang in the air. Tonight, you tried to poison my wedding with that same cruelty. But you've made a critical error. What error? He breathed. You forgot that some of us fight back. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and I watched Marcus's face cycle through denial, anger, and finally, a terrible understanding. But just as I thought he might finally retreat with whatever dignity he had left, he made the worst possible choice. He pulled out his own phone. You think you're so smart, he said, his voice shaking with rage. But I have recordings too, Sarah. Every performance review, every disciplinary conversation, every time you screwed up and I had to cover for you. And I have photos. My blood turned to ice. Photos? Marcus's smile was sick and triumphant. Company security cameras catch everything, sweetheart. Including that little breakdown you had in the supply closet after I gave you your annual review. Crying like a child, mascara running everywhere. Very professional. Very stable. The cruelty in his voice made several of my cousins step forward, but I held up a hand. My mind was racing. The supply closet incident had been 3 months ago, after Marcus had given me a performance review so scathing and personally attacking that I'd hidden in the storage room to compose myself before going back to my desk. The idea that he'd somehow accessed security footage of my lowest moment and kept it. You recorded me having a panic attack? My voice was barely a whisper. I documented an employee's emotional instability, Marcus corrected, his confidence returning as he sensed he'd found a weapon. Which will be very relevant when I file a harassment complaint against you for this little stunt. Who's going to believe a mentally unstable employee over a department manager with 15 years of experience? The ballroom had gone deadly quiet. Even my grandmother looked shaken. But it was David who spoke first, his voice low and dangerous. You filmed my wife without her consent during a private moment of distress, then kept that footage for personal use? Marcus's smirk faltered slightly. It's company property. I was protecting the organization from potential liability. Bullshit. The word came from my cousin Michael, who'd been quiet until now. As a cybersecurity specialist, he'd been listening with growing interest. Security footage is automatically archived and deleted after 90 days unless there's an incident report. If you have 3-month-old footage of a specific employee, you either filed a formal complaint, which would be documented, or you illegally copied and stored private surveillance. Marcus's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. Actually, I designed security systems for 3 major corporations, Michael continued conversationally. Including Morrison Industries. You know, your father-in-law's company? The one that uses the same security contractor as your firm? The blood drained from Marcus's face so fast I thought he might faint. So here's what's going to happen, Michael said, pulling out his own phone. You're going to delete whatever footage you illegally obtained, and I'm going to call my contact at Morrison Industries to let them know their security protocols may have been compromised by a family member. You can't, Marcus started. Can't what? Can't report a potential security breach to a client? Michael's smile was razor-sharp. It's actually required under our service contract. Marcus was trapped, and he knew it. But cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. His eyes darted between me, Michael, and the growing circle of my family members. Then his gaze landed on something behind me, and his expression shifted to something almost feral. You know what, he said, his voice taking on a strange, manic quality. Fine. You want to play games? Let's play games. He raised his phone high above his head, and I realized with growing horror what he was about to do. Hey everyone, he shouted toward the other wedding reception happening in the adjacent ballroom. Want to hear about how Sarah Whitman is trying to blackmail her boss? The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus was actually trying to drag innocent strangers into this nightmare, attempting to humiliate me in front of an entirely different wedding party. But before he could shout again, my cousin Rachel, all 5'2" of pure fury, snatched the phone right out of his raised hand. Are you completely insane? She hissed, clutching his device. This is a private family event, you psychopath. Marcus lunged for his phone, but Rachel tossed it to Michael, who caught it with practiced ease. Give that back. That's theft. Actually, my father said calmly, that's preventing harassment and public disturbance. There's a significant legal difference. I watched Marcus's last shred of control evaporate completely. His face contorted with rage as he whipped around to face the curious guests from the other reception who had started peeking through the shared doorway between ballrooms. This woman, he pointed at me with a shaking finger, is trying to destroy an innocent man's career with lies and fabricated evidence. She's a vindictive, unstable. Sir. The hotel security team had finally arrived, 2 uniformed guards approaching with a kind of calm professionalism that suggested they'd dealt with wedding crashers before. Behind them trailed the mortified wedding planner, wringing her hands. Thank God, Emma breathed beside me. But Marcus wasn't finished. Even as the security guards flanked him, he kept talking, his voice carrying across both ballrooms now. Ask her about the Henderson account. Ask her about the Morrison presentation. She's trying to frame me for things she screwed up herself. More guests from the adjacent reception had gathered in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. I felt heat crawling up my neck as dozens of strangers stared at me in my wedding dress, trying to piece together the drama unfolding before them. Ma'am, one of the security guards addressed me. We understand this individual wasn't invited to your event. That's correct, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He's my employer, and he's been making threats and disrupting our reception. Marcus let out a bark of bitter laughter. Threats? I'm the one being threatened here. She's got illegal recordings, stolen company documents. Documents I created, I interrupted, finding my voice again. Work product that I developed and that he took credit for. Prove it, Marcus snarled. Show them your so-called evidence. Let everyone see what kind of person you really are. The security guards exchanged glances, clearly trying to determine if this was a civil matter or something requiring police intervention. Around us, both wedding parties watched like spectators at the world's most uncomfortable tennis match. Mr. Caldwell, my grandmother said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade, I think you provided quite enough evidence of your character all by yourself. And you've given us plenty to work with, Michael added quietly, still holding Marcus's phone. Did you know most phones automatically back up recordings to cloud storage? Very convenient for digital forensics. Marcus's eyes went wide with a new kind of panic. You can't access my personal files. Can't I? Michael's smile was predatory. Cybersecurity specialist, remember? And you did just hand me your unlocked phone while threatening my cousin at her wedding. I'd say that constitutes consent to examine potential evidence of harassment. I watched Marcus realize that his final gambit had backfired spectacularly. Not only had he failed to humiliate me further, he potentially handed over evidence of his own wrongdoing. The security guard cleared his throat. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us now. The hotel has a strict policy about disrupting private events. As they moved to escort Marcus out, he made one last desperate attempt to regain control. This isn't over, Sarah, he called back to me, his voice echoing off the ballroom walls. You have no idea what you've started. I straightened my shoulders, surrounded by my family, and smiled. Yes, I do. The aftermath of Marcus's forced exit should have brought relief, but instead, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. The security guards had escorted him out, but his final threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was just getting started. Well, my grandmother said, straightening her pearls with the same composure she probably used during board meetings, that was certainly memorable. The guests from the other wedding reception were slowly filtering back to their own party, phones undoubtedly full of videos they'd be sharing for weeks. I could already imagine the social media posts. OMG, you guys won't believe what happened at this wedding we crashed. David wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me close. Are you okay? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text. Then another. Then my phone started ringing. Sarah? Emma peered at my screen. Who's calling you at your wedding? I glanced down and felt my stomach drop. It's Jessica. From accounting. The phone kept ringing insistently. Around me, my wedding guests were slowly returning to their conversations, but I could feel their curious glances. The night that was supposed to be about celebration had turned into something else entirely. Answer it, my father said quietly. If she's calling now, it's important. I swiped to accept the call, putting it on speaker since privacy seemed pointless at this point. Sarah? Oh my God, Sarah, I'm so sorry to call you tonight, but I just got the strangest phone call. Jessica's voice was tight with anxiety. Someone called me asking about Marcus and the Morrison retreat, and they said you had recordings? My blood went cold. Who called you, Jessica? I don't know. A woman. She said she was a journalist and that there was going to be a story about workplace harassment at our company. She knew details about what happened in the hotel hallway. Things I never told anyone. I looked around the circle of my family's faces, seeing my own confusion reflected back at me. Jessica, I haven't talked to any journalists. But someone has those recordings, right? The ones of Marcus, you know. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because if this comes out, if there's going to be an investigation, I need to know. I need to prepare myself. David was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. He held up the screen to show me a Google search for my name. The results made my knees weak. 3 different news outlets had posted stories in the last hour. The headlines made me sick. Wedding reception turns ugly as employee confronts boss. Viral video, boss crashes employee's wedding, explosive confrontation follows. Harassment allegations fly at luxury wedding venue. Oh no, I breathed. Jessica, someone recorded Marcus's meltdown here tonight. It's already online. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, this is going to ruin everything. Sarah, you don't understand. I can't have my name attached to this. I have a new job now, a good job, and if this gets out. Jessica, wait, but the line had gone dead. Michael appeared at my elbow, Marcus's phone still in his hand. His expression was grim. We have a problem. I've been going through his recent calls and messages. He didn't just show up here randomly tonight. What do you mean? I mean someone told him about your wedding. Someone gave him the venue, the time, everything. And that same someone has been feeding him information about what you might have on him. David looked up from his own phone, his face pale. Sarah, there are more videos going live. Different angles, different phones. This is spreading fast. I felt the walls of the beautiful ballroom closing in around me. What had started as Marcus's desperate attempt to humiliate me was spiraling into something much bigger, much more public than I'd ever intended. Who? I whispered to Michael. Who's been talking to him? He turned Marcus's phone toward me, showing me a text thread that made my heart stop. The contact name read, HR, Patricia Wells. My own HR director had been feeding Marcus information. And now, with videos of tonight's confrontation going viral, everyone was about to learn exactly what kind of company I worked for. The war I'd started was about to become very, very public. My hands shook as I stared at Marcus's phone, Patricia Wells' name glowing on the screen like an accusation. Patricia, who had sat across from me during my hiring interview, who had processed my vacation request with a sympathetic smile, who had nodded understandingly when I'd mentioned workplace stress during my benefits enrollment. Patricia, who had apparently been Marcus's inside source all along. Show me the messages, I said quietly. Michael scrolled through the text thread, and each message felt like a knife twist. Asterisk Sarah requested time off for wedding planning again. She's definitely up to something. Asterisk found her going through old employee files during lunch. Very suspicious behavior. Asterisk she's been asking other departments about the Morrison account. Might want to get ahead of this. Asterisk. The most recent message was timestamped just 3 hours ago. Asterisk wedding is at Riverside Manor, Grand Ballroom. She'll be vulnerable there, surrounded by family. Perfect time to remind her who's in control. Asterisk. Jesus, Emma whispered, reading over my shoulder. She set you up. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Sarah Whitman? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 News. I'm calling about the video circulating from your wedding reception tonight. Would you be available for an on-camera interview? What? My brain struggled to process. How did you get my number? We've been investigating workplace harassment allegations at several local companies. Your confrontation tonight appears to corroborate some information we've already gathered. I understand you have documentation of systematic abuse? The ballroom seemed to tilt around me. I never said anything about documentation to anyone. Actually, we received an anonymous tip about an hour ago. Someone claiming to have inside knowledge of your situation. They suggested we might want to look into Caldwell Industries' employment practices. I met David's eyes, seeing my own confusion reflected there. An anonymous tip from whom? I'm not at liberty to say, but they seemed very familiar with your case. They mentioned recorded conversations, financial irregularities, and a pattern of harassment targeting female employees. My grandmother stepped closer, her expression sharp with concern. Sarah, hang up. Don't say another word. But Rebecca Chin wasn't finished. Ms. Whitman, I should mention, we've already contacted Caldwell Industries for comment. They released a statement an hour ago claiming you're a disgruntled employee making false accusations to cover your own performance issues. They're calling tonight's incident an unfortunate display of workplace retaliation. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. They'd gotten ahead of the story. While I was standing in my wedding dress, trying to process what had just happened, Marcus's company had already crafted their narrative. I wasn't a victim of harassment, I was an unstable employee having a public breakdown. This is spinning out of control, David said, reaching for his own buzzing phone. Sarah, I'm getting calls from people I don't even know. Someone posted our wedding hashtag online, and now reporters are finding our guests on social media. Emma grabbed my arm. We need to get you out of here. Now. Before more news crews show up. But it was too late. Through the ballroom's tall windows, I could see the first news van pulling into the hotel's circular drive, its satellite dish extending like an antenna searching for prey. Marcus had wanted to humiliate me at my wedding. Instead, he'd turned my private moment of standing up for myself into a public spectacle, one where his company controlled the narrative and I looked like exactly what he'd always said I was. A worthless employee who couldn't handle professional criticism. The real battle was just beginning, and I was about to discover that sometimes fighting back only gives your enemies bigger weapons to use against you. The second news van arrived as we were trying to figure out our escape route. Then a third. Through the ballroom windows, I watched reporters setting up equipment on the hotel's manicured lawn like they were covering a natural disaster instead of someone's wedding reception. Sarah. Michael's voice was tight with urgency. You need to see this. He held up Marcus's phone again, showing me a new text from Patricia Wells, sent just minutes ago. Phase 2 initiated. Local news has a prepared statement. Corporate lawyers are standing by. This should discredit her completely. Phase 2. David's voice was dangerous. This was planned? Before anyone could answer, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized, my office. At 10:47 p.m. on a Saturday night, someone from Caldwell Industries was calling me. Don't answer it, my father warned, but I was already swiping to accept. I needed to know how deep this conspiracy went. Sarah? The voice was Patricia Wells, sickeningly sweet with false concern. Honey, I just heard about what happened at your reception. Are you all right? The audacity was breathtaking. Patricia. How thoughtful of you to call. I wanted to reach out before you hear this from someone else, but there's going to be an emergency HR investigation starting Monday morning. Marcus filed a formal complaint about tonight's incident, and with all these videos circulating. She trailed off with practiced regret. Well, threatening a supervisor with false accusations in public is grounds for immediate termination. My family had gone completely silent, everyone straining to listen. I put the phone on speaker. False accusations? I kept my voice level. Oh, sweetie, I know you've been under stress lately. The wedding planning, the performance issues Marcus has been documenting, the emotional instability we discussed during your last evaluation. Sometimes people lash out when they're overwhelmed. I had never had an evaluation with Patricia. We'd never discussed emotional instability. She was creating a paper trail in real time, probably while recording the call. That's interesting, Patricia. Because I don't recall any conversation about emotional instability. Well, it was more of an informal chat. But don't worry, the company wants to help you through this difficult time. If you're willing to issue a public apology and retract these harassment allegations, we might be able to work something out. Maybe a generous severance package, a positive reference letter. The bribe was so blatant it took my breath away. But what scared me more was how smoothly she delivered it, like she'd done this before. And if I don't apologize? Patricia's voice hardened just slightly. Then you'll face the full consequences of your actions. Corporate takes false harassment allegations very seriously, especially when they're made in such a public manner. We have lawyers prepared to file defamation suits, and Marcus is considering pressing criminal charges for attempted extortion. Through the windows, I could see a reporter doing a practice run, speaking earnestly into her microphone with our wedding venue as her backdrop. The crawl of text at the bottom of every news channel would soon read my name alongside words like harassment hoax and workplace retaliation. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, honey. But don't take too long. These stories have a way of getting worse the longer they sit. Oh, and Sarah? You might want to stay away from the office on Monday. For everyone's safety. The line went dead, leaving me standing in my wedding dress, surrounded by my family, while news crews gathered outside like vultures. Marcus hadn't just crashed my wedding. He'd walked into a carefully orchestrated trap designed to destroy not just my career, but my credibility completely. And I played right into their hands. The hotel manager appeared at my elbow, her professional smile strained to the breaking point. Mrs. Morrison, I'm terribly sorry, but we're going to need to discuss relocating your reception to a private dining room. The media presence is disrupting our other guests. Morrison? I stared at her blankly before remembering, I'd just gotten married. My name was legally Sarah Morrison now. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd taken the same surname as Marcus's father-in-law, the man whose account had started this whole nightmare. The private dining room is much smaller, the manager continued apologetically. Perhaps we could arrange for... No. My grandmother's voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. My granddaughter paid for this ballroom, and she's going to use this ballroom. If your other guests have complaints, you can offer them vouchers for another evening. While my grandmother faced down the hotel manager, David's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and went pale. It's my boss, he said quietly. The senior partner at my law firm. My stomach dropped. David was a junior associate at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, the kind of place where reputation mattered more than talent and where partners read the society pages as carefully as legal briefs. Answer it, I said, though every instinct screamed against it. David stepped away for privacy, but his half of the conversation carried anyway. Yes, sir. No, sir, she's not making false allegations. I understand your concern about the firm's reputation. Each yes, sir felt like a nail in our collective coffin. David's career was built on his credibility, and now his wife was being painted as an unstable woman making vindictive accusations against her boss. Michael appeared beside me again, his expression grim. I've been monitoring Marcus's phone. He's getting calls from someone coaching him on what to say to reporters. They've got talking points prepared. Who's coaching him? The calls are coming from a blocked number, but based on the timing and Patricia's messages, I'd guess corporate counsel. They're treating this like a full-scale crisis management operation. Emma grabbed my arm suddenly. Sarah, look. She pointed toward the ballroom's entrance, where my cousin Jennifer was having an animated conversation with someone on her phone. As we watched, Jennifer's expression shifted from confusion to horror. Oh no, I breathed, understanding immediately. She's talking to Catherine Morrison. Marcus's wife. Jennifer caught my eye across the room and mouthed I'm sorry before continuing her conversation. I could only imagine what Catherine was hearing, that her husband had crashed a stranger's wedding to publicly humiliate an employee, that there were videos circulating online, that harassment allegations were flying. David returned, his face ashen. The firm is putting me on administrative leave pending the outcome of any investigations. They can't have an associate whose spouse is involved in a public harassment scandal. Administrative leave? My voice cracked. You didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter. Guilt by association is enough in corporate law. If this gets uglier, if there are lawsuits, they can't risk having me connected to the firm. The domino effect was happening exactly as Patricia had planned. First my job, then my husband's career, then our reputations, our financial stability, our future. All because I tried to stand up for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the Channel 7 website. You're going to want to see this. A friend. With trembling fingers, I pulled up the news site. The headline made my blood turn to ice. Exclusive, disgruntled employee's pattern of workplace complaints revealed. Below it was a photo, my employee ID picture from the company directory, alongside a detailed timeline of every minor workplace issue I'd ever reported. The missing laptop charger I'd mentioned to IT. The time I'd asked facilities about the broken air conditioning in my cubicle. A question I'd raised about unclear project deadlines. They'd turned 18 months of normal workplace communication into evidence of chronic complaining and difficult behavior. But worse than the article was what I saw in the comments section. Someone had posted additional photos, screenshots of my social media posts from the past year. Pictures of me at happy hours with coworkers, smiling at company events, celebrating small wins at the office. The caption read, "Does this look like someone being harassed and traumatized?" Sarah Whitman seemed pretty happy with her job until her performance review went badly. They were weaponizing my own attempts to maintain professionalism against me. The worst part wasn't seeing my face plastered across news websites or watching my professional life get dissected in real time. The worst part was the phone call that came at 11:23 p.m., just as we were finally preparing to evacuate to the hotel's private dining room. It was my mother's voice, shaky and confused. "Sarah, honey, there are reporters at our house. They're asking about your mental health history." My blood turned to ice. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing, of course, but they seem to know things. About your anxiety medication in college, about the therapist you saw after Dad's heart attack. How could they possibly know about that?" I looked around the ballroom at my family's worried faces, the answer hitting me like a freight train. "Mom, did you ever list me as an emergency contact on your insurance forms? For Dad's medical stuff?" "Well, yes, but what does that have to do with?" She stopped, understanding dawning. "Oh my God. They accessed medical records?" Before I could respond, Michael grabbed my arm, Marcus's phone clutched in his other hand. "Sarah, we have a bigger problem. There's a group text thread here with Patricia, Marcus, and someone listed as crisis management. They're not just destroying your reputation, they're going after your family's businesses too." He showed me the screen. The messages made my knees weak. Asterisk Eleanor Whitman's PR firm has several city contracts up for renewal next quarter. Might be worth a call to the mayor's office about her granddaughter's stability. Asterisk. Asterisk David Morrison works at Blackstone and Associates. Their biggest client is Morrison Industries. One phone call from the right board member could solve two problems at once. Asterisk. Asterisk background check on the bride's father turned up interesting results. Federal prosecutor with political ambitions. This scandal could derail any future campaigns. Asterisk. They weren't just coming for me. They were systematically targeting everyone I loved, using their connections and influence to spread the damage as wide as possible. "This is insane," David breathed, reading over my shoulder. "This is conspiracy-level retaliation." My father appeared beside us, his prosecutor instincts clearly activated. "Let me see that phone." As he scrolled through the messages, his expression grew darker. "Sarah, this isn't just harassment. This is criminal conspiracy, invasion of privacy, possibly RICO violations if they're using corporate resources for personal vendettas. But can we prove it?" I asked desperately. "Or is this just more evidence that will mysteriously disappear?" Before he could answer, Emma came rushing over from the entrance. "They're interviewing wedding guests outside. Random people who don't even know you, asking them to describe your behavior tonight, whether you seemed unstable or vindictive." Through the windows, I could see it happening. Guests from the other wedding reception, strangers who'd witnessed Marcus's meltdown, speaking earnestly to reporters. But from this distance, I had no way of knowing what story they were telling. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, I almost didn't answer. "Sarah Morrison?" The voice was male, older, with a kind of authority that suggested wealth and power. "This is Richard Morrison. I believe we need to talk." Marcus's father-in-law. The board member who could end David's career with a single phone call. "Mr. Morrison," I managed, my voice barely steady. "I'm at the hotel. Penthouse suite. I suggest you come up immediately, before the situation gets even more out of hand." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone while chaos swirled around me. The man who controlled both my husband's career and my former boss's family connections wanted a private meeting. And somehow, I didn't think he was calling to offer help. The elevator to the penthouse felt like a death march. David insisted on coming with me, but I convinced him to wait in the lobby. Whatever Richard Morrison wanted to discuss, I suspected it would be better handled without witnesses. My grandmother had wanted to come too, but something told me this conversation required the same calculated precision that had gotten me into this mess. The elevator doors opened to reveal a suite that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and sitting in a leather chair that looked like it belonged in a CEO's office was a man I recognized from corporate headshots and society page photos. Richard Morrison was exactly what I'd expected, silver-haired, expensively dressed, with a kind of quiet authority that came from decades of making decisions that affected other people's lives. What I hadn't expected was that he wasn't alone. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, not bothering to stand. "Please, sit down. I believe you know Patricia Wells." My blood turned to ice. Patricia sat in the chair opposite him, no longer bothering with her fake maternal concern. She looked like a cat who'd caught a particularly satisfying mouse. "Surprised to see me?" Patricia's smile was razor-sharp. "I thought it was time we had an honest conversation about your future." I remained standing, every instinct screaming danger. "This is highly irregular. Having an HR meeting in a hotel penthouse at midnight." "This isn't an HR meeting," Richard interrupted smoothly. "This is damage control. You see, Sarah, your little performance tonight has created problems for multiple people I care about." He gestured toward the coffee table, where an iPad displayed several news websites. All featured my face, my wedding, my family. The headlines had gotten worse: harassment hoax, employee's elaborate revenge scheme exposed, and wedding meltdown, when workplace drama goes too far. "My daughter Catherine is devastated," Richard continued conversationally. "She's been defending her husband all evening, calling friends and family to explain that Marcus is the victim of a vindictive employee. It's humiliating for the entire family. Marcus crashed my wedding and publicly humiliated me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Your daughter should be asking herself why her husband was so desperate to destroy my happiness that he'd violate basic human decency. Patricia leaned forward, her expression predatory. But that's where you're wrong, dear. Marcus didn't crash your wedding, he was invited. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of an email. From my company address. To Marcus. With a detailed invitation to my wedding reception, including specific timing for when he should arrive to discuss the Henderson account discrepancies privately. I never sent that, I whispered. Of course you didn't, Patricia said smugly. I sent it. From your computer, during one of those late nights when you were working so diligently on your little investigation. It's amazing what someone can do with administrative access to company systems. The room tilted around me. You orchestrated this entire thing? Richard stood up, moving to the window with his hands clasped behind his back. Patricia brought some concerning information to my attention several weeks ago. An employee making wild accusations against a department head, gathering recordings, accessing confidential files. It seemed like a situation that could spiral out of control if not handled properly. So you decided to frame me instead? We decided to give you enough rope to hang yourself, Patricia corrected. And it worked beautifully. Instead of quietly filing complaints through proper channels, you chose to create a public spectacle. You threatened your supervisor, implied you had damaging evidence, and did it all in front of witnesses with cameras. She pulled up another video on her phone, security footage from tonight, but edited to remove context. It showed me speaking to Marcus, my posture confident, my expression defiant. Without audio, without the context of his verbal abuse, it looked exactly like what they were claiming, an aggressive employee confronting her boss. The narrative writes itself, Richard added, still gazing out at the city. Troubled employee with a history of complaints can't accept negative feedback. Develops elaborate conspiracy theories about her supervisor. Finally snaps at her own wedding and makes public threats. My hands were shaking now. People know the truth. My family heard what Marcus said. Your family, Patricia interrupted, who have obvious bias and motivation to support your version of events. That's not exactly credible testimony. Richard turned back toward me, his expression almost sympathetic. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah. You're going to issue a public apology admitting that your allegations were false and motivated by workplace stress. You'll resign from your position effective immediately and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, we won't pursue legal action for defamation and harassment. And if I refuse? Patricia's smile widened. Then we move to phase 3. Criminal charges for extortion and terrorist threats. A very public lawsuit that will drag your family through months of depositions and media scrutiny. David's law firm will have no choice but to terminate him permanently. Your grandmother's business relationships will suffer irreparable damage. She leaned back in her chair, supremely confident. We have unlimited resources and professional crisis management teams. You have recordings that we'll claim are edited and a family with everything to lose. How do you think that battle ends? The trap was perfect. They'd maneuvered me into a position where fighting back would destroy everyone I loved, but surrendering would validate their narrative and leave them free to do this to other women. I need time to consider your offer, I said finally. You have until Monday morning, Richard said dismissively. After that, we proceed without your cooperation. As I turned toward the elevator, Patricia called after me. Oh, and Sarah? You might want to check your email. I sent you some photos from tonight that didn't make it into the news coverage. Yet. The elevator doors closed on her predatory smile, and I realized with growing horror that they weren't done destroying my life. They were just getting started. Back in the ballroom, I found my family huddled around David's laptop, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of the screen. The silence that greeted my return was more terrifying than any of Marcus's screaming had been. What did Morrison want? My father asked without looking up. Complete surrender, I said quietly. Public apology, resignation, NDA. The full capitulation package. Emma gestured toward the laptop screen. Sarah, you need to see what Patricia sent you. I leaned over David's shoulder and felt my world collapse completely. The email contained dozens of photos from tonight, but not the ones that had already been published. These were different. Carefully cropped, strategically edited images that told a completely different story. There was a photo of me smiling while Marcus spoke, taken before he'd started his verbal assault but edited to look like I was enjoying his humiliation. Another showed David's hand on Marcus's wrist, but cropped to make it appear as though my new husband was the aggressor, physically threatening an older man. The worst was a group shot of my male cousin standing near Marcus, innocent concern transformed into what looked like intimidation tactics. This is what runs tomorrow if I don't sign their agreement, I whispered. But it was the final photo that made my blood run cold. A screenshot of what appeared to be a social media post from my own account, timestamped 3 days ago, can't wait for my wedding. Maybe my horrible boss will finally get what's coming to him. Party popper ring. I'd never written that post. I'd never even thought those words. They hacked your social media, Michael said grimly. Created fake posts backdated to make it look premeditated. My grandmother sank into a chair, looking every one of her 83 years for the first time I could remember. They've thought of everything. David's phone rang, his law firm again. This time, he didn't even answer. We all knew what they were calling about. The photos Patricia had sent me were probably already making rounds in legal circles, painting him as a man who couldn't control his unstable wife. There's something else, Emma said hesitantly. She pulled up a news website on her own phone. Channel 12 just ran a segment about workplace harassment allegations and due process. They interviewed an employment law expert about the dangers of trial by social media. The expert looked familiar, too familiar. It was Patricia's sister, Dr. Linda Wells, a psychology professor who specialized in workplace behavior. She spoke with academic authority about attention-seeking behavior and vindictive personality disorders, never mentioning her connection to the case. Even their expert witnesses are rigged, David said in disbelief. I walked to the windows, watching the news crews pack up their equipment. They had what they needed, enough footage and quotes to support whatever narrative Patricia's crisis management team fed them. Tomorrow's coverage would focus on due process, the dangers of false accusations, and the tragic story of a young woman whose mental health struggles had erupted in public. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news. Jessica here. I'm sorry, but I can't get involved. I have kids to think about. Good luck. Another buzz. Sarah, it's Amanda from the Morrison account team. HR called me at home. They're asking about your pattern of aggressive behavior. I told them I never saw anything, but they're really pushing. And another, this is Kevin from IT. They want me to sign a statement about your computer access. Said you were looking through files you shouldn't have been. I don't know what to do. They were working through the weekend, calling employees at home, building their case while I was trapped in a hotel ballroom watching my life disintegrate in real time. By Monday morning, they'd have a dozen signed statements painting me as a problem employee, a security risk, an unstable woman who'd finally snapped. We have to fight this, I said quietly. With what? My father asked, his prosecutor instincts clearly warring with his paternal protection. They control the narrative, the evidence, the resources. They've turned your moment of standing up for yourself into career suicide. So I'm supposed to just surrender? Let them destroy me and then disappear quietly? Michael looked up from Marcus's phone, his expression strange. Actually, they might have made one mistake. What do you mean? He held up the device. Remember how I said Marcus's phone backs up to cloud storage? Well, it syncs with more than just his personal accounts. His corporate email, his calendar, his contact list, everything is connected. My heart started beating faster. Are you saying? I'm saying Patricia and Morrison weren't as careful about digital security as they thought. Every text, every call, every coordinated move they've made tonight is documented right here. For the first time since leaving the penthouse, I felt something other than despair. They'd underestimated the very technology they'd used to trap me. And sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. The war room we'd created in the hotel's business center looked like something out of a political campaign. Michael had 3 laptops running, cross-referencing data from Marcus's phone with public records and corporate filings. Emma was coordinating with my bridesmaids who'd gone home to gather additional evidence, screenshots, emails, anything that could support our counterattack. My father was on the phone with federal contacts, his prosecutor voice getting sharper with each conversation. And me? I was finally doing what I should have done 18 months ago. I was fighting back with everything I had. Got it, Michael announced, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The smoking gun we needed. He spun his laptop toward me, revealing an email thread between Patricia, Richard Morrison, and someone identified as Blackwater Crisis Management. The timestamps showed they'd been planning this for 3 weeks, long before Marcus crashed my wedding. Look at this, Michael pointed to a specific message. They call it Operation Gaslight. They've done this before, Sarah. 3 times in the past 5 years, to women who threatened to expose harassment at Morrison Industries subsidiary companies. The thread contained detailed strategies, how to manipulate social media algorithms to amplify negative coverage. Which journalists could be counted on to run favorable stories. Even instructions for accessing employee medical records through insurance company connections. This is a criminal conspiracy, my father said, ending his call. I just spoke with the FBI's white-collar crime division. They've been building a case against Morrison Industries for contract fraud. This gives them the RICO predicate they needed. My phone rang, Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 again. This time, I answered with confidence. Miss Chen, I'm glad you called. I have a story for you. A real one. 3 hours later, at 3:47 a.m. on what should have been my wedding night, I sat in Channel 7's studio wearing my grandmother's blazer over my wedding dress, facing a camera that would broadcast the truth to the entire city. Good morning, I'm Rebecca Chen with a Channel 7 exclusive. With me is Sarah Morrison, the young woman at the center of what appeared to be a workplace harassment controversy. But as we discovered, the real story is far more disturbing. I took a deep breath, thinking of Jessica, of Amanda from accounting, of every woman who'd been silenced by powerful men with unlimited resources. For the past 18 months, I was systematically abused by my supervisor, Marcus Caldwell, I began, my voice steady. When I gathered evidence to report his behavior, his family's company launched a coordinated campaign to destroy my credibility and silence me permanently. As I spoke, the screen filled with evidence, the recorded conversations where Marcus berated female employees. The financial documents showing embezzlement. The text messages revealing the conspiracy to frame me. Patricia's fake email sent from my account. The edited social media posts. All of it laid bare under the harsh studio lights. What you witnessed at my wedding wasn't a breakdown, I continued. It was the final move in their plan to publicly humiliate me into silence. They turned my moment of standing up for myself into a weapon against me. But the most devastating evidence came last, security footage from Marcus's building showing him and Patricia meeting after hours, celebrating while reviewing their frame-up plan. The audio was crystal clear. She actually thinks she's so smart, Patricia's voice echoed through the studio. Wait until she sees what real power looks like. By sunrise, #Operation Gaslight was trending nationally. Patricia Wells was arrested at 6 a.m. on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and violation of federal privacy laws. Marcus followed 2 hours later. By noon, Richard Morrison had resigned from all his board positions, and Morrison Industries stock had dropped 18%. But the moment that mattered most came at 8:23 a.m., when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. I saw the news. I'm ready to tell my story now. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. Then another from Amanda, count me in. We're stronger together. And finally, one from a number I didn't recognize. This is Rachel from the prosecutor's office. We've had 15 women contact us this morning about similar retaliation campaigns. Your courage just brought down a whole network. David found me on the hotel balcony, watching the city wake up to a very different story than the one Patricia had planned. So, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind, how does it feel to win? I leaned back against his chest, thinking about the long road ahead, the trials, the investigations, the work of rebuilding everything they'd tried to destroy. It feels like justice, I said softly. And it feels like just the beginning. Marcus had called me worthless at my wedding. But he'd been wrong. I was worth fighting for. We all were. And sometimes, the people who try to destroy you just end up revealing exactly who they really are.